Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for joining, and we will be giving you a brief update from the Michigan chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And our brief update this morning is news in regards to an amicus brief that was filed on behalf of our office here at CARE Michigan, led by our lead staff attorney, Sister Amy, who's on right now. And she will explain the basic occasions or what led to this point that we as a Muslim advocacy organization are following an amicus brief in support of a Protestant Christian private institution of higher learning. In saying that, in general, as an advocacy organization, we be very clear about this, that as Muslims, we don't affirm any other group's religious beliefs that conflict with Islamic beliefs. So generally speaking, anytime you see CARE Michigan advocating on behalf of other individuals, such as we filed a lawsuit successfully in regards to for a Jewish plaintiff, for instance, years ago, and we were able to get kosher accommodations for this individual. It's not that we are affirming Judaic law, but if we as Muslims in America, and particularly in Michigan, if we see Jewish individuals or Christian individuals who are trying to assert their bona fide, sincerely held religious beliefs in government or even their private institutions, and they have their rights trampled upon, or their rights are put in jeopardy, then that puts Muslims in a precarious situation. So in order for us to preserve our religious rights here, we must stand and affirm the bona fide, sincerely held religious beliefs in private religious institutions held by Christians, because Christians are dominant in the United States of America status quo, in particular white Christians. So if white Christians who are Protestants, Catholics, even evangelicals are having their freedom of speech and their freedom of assembly brought into question in private institutions, in churches or in universities, then we as Muslims are in really big trouble. So that's kind of the background of the ethos of why, an organization like CARE Michigan would file suit and on behalf of protecting the religious rights of Christians here in the state of Michigan. Without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Sister Amy, and she can kind of give some of the background of what got us here to why we are we filed yesterday this amicus brief on behalf of this, in support of this Protestant Christian institution.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Brother Dawood. Before we talk specifically about the amicus brief, I think it's sort of important to go back and kind of figure out the trajectory for how we got here in the first place. As some of you may recall, in 2020, there was a pro-LGBTQ group that was pushing a ballot initiative to expand the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to include a definition of sex that would include, or prohibit really discrimination based on gender identity, sexual orientation, and things like that. More rights for everybody is more rights for everybody. But what that bill also attempted to do was redefine religion to be only what you thought and what you believed inside your home, meaning that you could not use religion as a defense, or your sincerely held religious beliefs as a defense for a claim of discrimination against you. So for instance, if a individual went into an Islamic school, and this is the example that we were giving at the time, if an individual went into an Islamic school to teach as an Islamic school professor, and they were they held views that were in opposition to Islam, they could not be terminated from the Islamic school, because it would be a discrimination complaint, because that would not be considered a religious belief, because it was something that was happening or religious expression, because it was something that was happening outside of an individual's belief. That's the thing that we were identifying for our legislators and the people that were signing that ballot initiative as a concern for us. So 2020 goes along. That amendment did not pass. It did not pass with the ballot initiative. They didn't have enough signatures. So around 2023, they started bringing it back through our Michigan legislature as an actual formal bill without the coded religion language. They did not use the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to define religion in the bill. So it just sort of expanded like who was protected under the law. But what it didn't do is it didn't provide any express religious protections for our religious schools, for our religiously observant people. And it just added this language. At the time that this was happening between 2023 and 2024, 15 other states had passed similar legislation. But 15 other states had recognized the risk that this put religious freedom or religious liberties and religious beliefs in with regards to sort of curtailing what religion was going to do and what you could or could not do to protect your own religious identity. So all of those 15 states who passed this law before Michigan added in express religious protections to be a defense against like having to do something that violated your sincerely held religious beliefs or the sincerely held religious theology of a religious institution, such as an Islamic school, or in this case, a Christian school. Michigan brought this bill forward without that protection in it. At the time that they did that, and before the vote, we joined other faith-based organizations, including the Michigan Catholic Conference, the Michigan Catholic Diocese, and some others, saying we need to take a revisit of this bill so that we can have religious protections put in. It was seen as important by 15 other states. Why won't Michigan do it? And instead of taking a pause on the bill, what they actually did is they fast-tracked it through debates without a hearing, and they only allowed 2 people to speak on the floor on the day that the bill was passed to provide testimony. Both of them were against providing any express religious protections. One was the ACLU and one was an individual who helped co-write the bill prior to it being introduced into Congress. So both of them with a specific agenda. We met with several legislators in Michigan to discuss this bill, and we identified the concerns that we had. And we spoke about the potential of a lawsuit against one of our Islamic school academies for a circumstance where a teacher would come in and sort of badmouth the beliefs of the Islamic school. We were told that we were alarmists. We were told that this couldn't happen. And they passed the law without amendment, without providing any religious protections for religiously observant communities and organizations. 6 months after the law passed, even before it was in effect, Calvin University, which is a Christian Reform college. So it's a college that is run by the Christian Reformed Church, who has a very specific and adopted doctrine. It's you can find it online. They're very methodical in how they talk about their doctrine. They were sued by a professor who was teaching philosophy. In his contract, he was required to teach philosophy from a Christian Reform perspective, meaning he was integrating faith values into his teaching, faith principles into his teaching as outlined by the Christian Reformed faith. But instead of doing that, what he did is he criticized the church's teaching specifically on LGBTQ rights. And he performed a same-sex marriage, not of just anybody, not of his friends, not of his family, but of an actual student that was at the school. And then he brought that back to the school by talking about it in his classroom. At the end of the semester, the church said, we can't have you back, even though you've been teaching here for a long time, because you're espousing something in the classroom that is against our values and it doesn't embody our faith. It is the exact lawsuit that CARE Michigan had identified since 2020 was going to take place if we did not take some steps to protect religious liberties here in Michigan. And it happened. So this case has been working itself through the courts since very early in 2025. And the church and the school have been arguing that this person doesn't have a claim for 2 reasons. Number one, he's not part of the protected class because he's not from the LGBTQ community. So he's not protected. He wasn't discriminated against because of his sex, which is what the standard said. But also, this is a violation of the First Amendment. And because the church is running the school, and the school has the ability to hire people and keep them in the classroom who personify the church's beliefs. And the appeals court agreed with them. But the individual appealed to our Supreme Court, the Michigan State Supreme Court, the highest authority in Michigan for deciding how law is applied. And the Michigan Supreme Court decided they would take this case up. Not ironically, the ACLU, who many of our legislators had relied upon for telling them that this lawsuit couldn't happen and that we were sort of being alarmists, filed a brief of their own. And they filed their brief in favor of the individual who is suing the religious college. And in their brief, they try to redefine what religion is to be both a communal thing, meaning that the nature of the religion is such that we have to advocate for everybody's rights, even if they don't align for us, but also being sort of singular in mind, meaning it's only based on what you believe and not what you actually do in your outward expression of faith. So that's not surprising. So we were reached out to by some other faith organizations who are trying to get across the point to the Supreme Court about how important this is for faith communities, that they don't move forward with allowing this lawsuit to happen, and to allowing success on this lawsuit, because the fundamental problem that this lawsuit brings up is whether or not a religious school who is founded in a faith and teaches through a lens of that faith has the ability to hire and maintain employees that are in line and willing to represent their faith and through embodiment and in their curriculum and in their teachings, or whether or not they are going to be religious in name only and they can't maintain their faith values because they're going to have to hire people that don't align with their values. And this is especially important for Muslim schools, because we know, as a minority religion, we are already susceptible to having people try to water down or erode our religion or criticize it. Even those who say that they're allies of Islam often have criticisms of Islam. And if that's allowed to go into our classroom, we're teaching young children, young adults, and teenagers, then the school becomes, religious in name only, and doesn't really embody the faith and the way that all religious institutions and educational facilities desire, and then their mission is eroded. So that's sort of where we stand on the lawsuit, and that's sort of our argument in the lawsuit. This is a fundamental First Amendment issue. The school, as a faith-based organization, has an absolute and fundamental right to determine who's going to be shaping and molding their religion in their society, meaning in their classrooms, on their campus, etc.
Thank you, Sister Amy. And I don't see any questions that are in the audience right now, but I also think there's a couple of other things that can be mentioned. And this is a very instructive moment, I think, for our community. And this is we could say a teaching moment, right? Number one, going back, and for emphasis, this bill that was written, that got put in, actually, it was written by our current State Attorney General, Dana Nessel. Prior to her being elected, she worked for an organization that was advocating the expansion of LGBTQI plus within the public sphere, and that this particular bill that was pushed forward has no exceptions for religion is actually radical. It's the most radical legislation that's put forward in the United States of America. Even when other states put forth such legislation, as what was mentioned, there was an exception for religion and for private institutions that are religious. So this is very radical. This is going the way of some countries in Western Europe and even in Ontario, Providence, that could actually criminalize people or find individuals civilly liable. That's the direction this bill is then taking us further in that type of direction, right? And we see this through this litigation of Calvin University being sued. The second other point that Amy mentioned in regards to ACLU, that we do work with ACLU and we partner, right? When Sister Amy mentioned that testimony that was given that day in Lansing, actually, I was there that day that legislation was put forward, and I was not allowed to give a counter perspective in regards to the harm. And those were, so-called allies of the community, right, that actually blocked us, which is an important point for our political education, that when we talk about not just the right, but the left, we have problems as far as individuals truly protecting the First Amendment. We have the woke right that seeks to chill our speech in regards to protesting about Zionist occupation of Palestine or genocide. Like that's the woke right that would say that they're against DEI, except when it comes to stifling speech and seeking to pull funding and even punish people for speaking out, right? So they claim they're for the First Amendment, except when it comes to that one issue. Well, similarly, we have we can say the woke left, that people that claim to be our allies that really have what I would term emanophobia, right? Like, in other words, they are against religious expression when it comes to certain progressive values that they believe are part of their, what we can say, secular creed. And LGBTQI is one of those. So the First Amendment is fine, but they'll be against the First Amendment. They won't say explicitly they're against the First Amendment, but operationally speaking, they are against the First Amendment when they when they support this type of legislation and they're writing briefs in this type of lawsuit. So this is just something for our political education. We have to be a people who have coalitions based upon principles, not personalities. We have no permanent allies. We only have permanent interests. And especially for Muslims who are engaged in political organizing or involved in political activism, including running for office, they should be very clear about this. And it was Democrats and people who Muslims in Michigan gave campaign contributions to, and even some people voted for, are the ones that are literally putting our religious rights as Muslims in jeopardy. And that's a very important point that needs to be, what we can say, double clicked on. So with that, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our preservation of our religious rights, which Hizbul Deen is the first objective of the sacred law of Islam. We are working to protect everyone's religious rights here in the state of Michigan. And also, in conclusion, we have our annual gala on May 3rd, Sunday, May 3rd at Soho. Doors open at 1 p.m. And we strongly urge you to support your community organization and our important work by going to our website at caremichigan.org and purchasing a ticket or tickets to our annual gala. Sheikh Mohammed Al-Masmari is our speaker, giving a community perspective on the importance of care work. And we will be talking about the importance of our 25 years of working on your behalf and the behalf of our children and behalf of those Muslims who haven't even been born yet in the state of Michigan. Thank you very much. May God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.